What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson. And guys, it's finally official. Darren Waller yesterday afternoon announced his retirement from the NFL. The Giants getting $11.6 million in cap savings from Waller's retirement, but they will be without their blockbuster acquisition from last offseason. Of course, they traded a third-round pick. That was the big-time move that the Giants made last year. We thought they were getting a 1,000-yard receiver at the tight end position, potentially. Thought we were getting a high-impact player, but Waller's first season with the Giants, pretty disappointing. A lot of injuries came into play and really held him back from reaching his potential with this team. Now, after one lackluster season with Big Blue, he's calling it quits, hanging up the cleats, focusing on presumably his music career. That sounds to be what he's very interested in doing. And I will say, first and foremost, I have no resentment towards Darren Waller, nothing personal against him. He waited a long time to make this decision. That's okay. It was a difficult decision for him. He's walking away from a lot of money, and he's doing it for his own personal benefit and mental health. So I got nothing but respect for him, and I don't think there's any reason to criticize Darren Waller for making this decision. But the Giants do have to respond to this decision. What are they going to do next? Who's going to step up and become the starter? Are they going to go ahead and use some of this money and sign free agents? What is the response from the New York Giants to this Darren Waller retirement? Well, that's what we're going to discuss in today's episode. But before we dive into all that, make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you're listening to Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, Alex, how are you doing today, my friend? And how are you feeling now that the Darren Waller retirement news is official?
I'm doing pretty good, and look, we always anticipated this was going to come. The day was just a matter of time until Darren Waller decided to call it quits. I mean, he had dropped enough of these kind of vague music videos about his potential retirement, and then he laid down in the sand, then a wave hit him in the face. I was like, I think he's calling it quits. At that moment, I was like, I think he's done. And the wave rolled up and hit him in the face, and his eyes are open. I don't know. I felt like it was a precursor to his eventual retirement. Now, obviously, it's official. The Giants recoup $11.6 million to spend if they so choose, and we'll discuss that a little bit. But also, they do have I think a $2.5 million cap hit this year, and then another like $5 million next year. So they do push a little bit into the future. But with that being said, you look at this Giants team, we could use a little bit of support at a couple different spots. I think the secondary is the one that we could all agree would be the most likely to get a little bit of allocation of resources. The offensive line got John Runyan, Jermaine Illuminor. They have a couple other guys they brought in to help fill out the depth there, compete with some of these youngsters during training camp. Then, of course, defensive line got a massive upgrade with Brian Burns. And then, got some new receivers there with Malik Neighbors. And then getting like guys like Bryce Ford Wheaton back just to add some competition to the depth. But you look at kind of this secondary, it's the weakest link. And yeah, like I know someone in the comments yesterday was like, yeah, I'm being a little pessimistic. And I'm trying to not be pessimistic, but more so realistic. And I think most people would agree, like, the secondary is probably our weakest link. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I just think it's an inexperienced thing. You know what I mean? These guys aren't bad players. They're just inexperienced players. Like Deonte Banks, love the guy. I raved about him yesterday. But the truth is he's inexperienced too. So he needs to get more experience. I think this is this season where he gets that real, one-to-one matchups with some of those really great receivers like he did last year. But now it's like he's the guy. Noah Dory Jackson, like he's the top gun. Cordell Flott, Nick McLeod, we just don't know what they are. So I think that it's fair to say, let's see what happens. This team, until proven otherwise, has a kind of a suspect secondary, but you never know. These guys could elevate their game. I like Cordell Flott. Nick McLeod's a solid player. I don't think he's a primary starter, but I think he's a really solid backup. Tyler Nubin's a rookie. What do we expect from him? Is he going to replicate exactly what we got from Xavier McKinney? Probably not. He's probably going to be a decent player, but he's not going to be X-Man kind of quality right off the bat if he ever gets to that level, because that's a really high level of play for a free safety who can kind of move around the field, different alignments. Love Tyler Nubin, really solid player, but we have to wait and see what he can actually become. So with that being said, why not add a veteran cornerback to the mix here? I like Stephon Gilmore. I think that he's a pretty solid player, lots of experience, can mentor some of these younger guys. 2 years of over 1,000 snaps under his belt consecutively. He served as the top gun for Dallas last year when Trayvon Diggs went down. The Giants are not asking him to be CB1. They're asking him to be CB2 or CB3. That's really what we're asking. We're asking him to help Cordell Flott become a better player, and we're asking him to fill in and play if need be. If the Giants need a good player and he's there and available, that's let the best man win. I'm tired of handing out free coupons at food stamps out here for guys who just don't deserve to be starting. I mean, that's the best way to put it though. I just don't think that some guys deserve to just be given starting jobs. I like them. I think Evan Neal has talent. He did have talent, but I don't think he deserves to be starting a right tackle off the bat. I think he's got to earn his job. And I think that's a pretty fair take. Anthony, I'll let you get your opinion on that, but I think it's fair to say letting these guys compete at positions that are very much undetermined is how you build good teams. You don't just give jobs out to guys who are struggling or inexperienced, or you just don't know where they're going to have unless they are rookies. I think that's the right way to go.
Yes, I agree with you, but I'm going to counterpoint and immediately say you are right, but you're also arguing against yourself. And I'm saying that because you're right. These players do need to compete and earn these starting jobs, but that might be the reason why you don't go out and sign a Stephon Gilmore to just take the starting job immediately and take all those practice reps away from a guy like Cordell Fly. I think with Gilmore or any of these veteran cornerbacks that you could consider signing who might potentially be your CB2, there's no rush to sign them. You don't need to go out there and bring in a Gilmore before training camp kicks off, because if you do that, all those training camp reps that were going to go to Trey Hawkins and Cordell Flott and Nick McLeod, well, now a lot of them are being taken up by Stephon Gilmore or whichever veteran cornerback you sign. So I think you wait on that. You don't rush into signing anybody in free agency until you're through training camp and you know, okay, this weakness is still on my roster. What if Cordell Flott goes into training camp and looks like an absolute stud? He looks like even better than Deonte Banks somehow, and you feel comfortable going into the season with him as your CB2. Well, then you don't need Stephon Gilmore, so why did you sign him in the first place? Now he's not even going to play all that much. So there's no rush to do anything here. A lot of Giants fans see, oh, we have $11.6 million in salary cap space. What are we waiting for? Go sign Stephon Gilmore. There's a lot of reasons to wait. There are no reasons to rush into signing a Gilmore or anybody in free agency. The Giants, honestly, in my opinion, should not be signing anybody in free agency until the end of July. Once we get to training camp and we see what we have in Cordell Flott going into his third season, in Nick McLeod going into his fourth season. How are these guys developing? How are they handling training camp? Do they look like quality starters? Okay, they don't. Now we sign somebody. There's just no rush. No need to rush at all if you're the New York Giants, in my personal opinion. So, yeah, I agree with you, Alex. Stephon Gilmore being on this team, well, that would be tremendous. He'd be perfect. He would fit right in, and he would be an upgrade most likely. And if not, that means that somebody earned that job. But the Giants shouldn't put their players in a position where they're given this opportunity to earn their jobs, and then immediately it's taken away from them by a veteran that they just go ahead and sign off the market. So I think that you have to wait, give the time for that competition to grow. Like you said, Alex, nobody should be given a starting job. That includes the players on this roster and the players that you sign from off of this roster. They shouldn't sign Stephon Gilmore and immediately hand him a starting job, because he would have it. He's Stephon Gilmore. He's a former All-Pro. Justin Simmons, if they went to sign a safety in free agency and they signed him, well, he was second-team All-Pro last year. He's automatically the starter, right, if you go ahead and sign him. That's not the way that this should operate. These players who've been told and promised that they will have the opportunity to compete for these starting jobs, give them their opportunity. Maybe they're really ready to take it on. They've been working really hard at it, and you're going to get some really cost-efficient contracts here if Cordell Flott pans out at that cornerback spot. Not only cost-efficient, but long-term. He's still got a couple more years left on his deal. So I wouldn't rush out there to sign anybody. I think you give everybody a chance to compete, like you said, Alex, and then you reevaluate the roster and decide if you need to make any upgrades. So if we're in the end of July and, hey, Cordell Flott has had some struggles, Malik Neighbors is absolutely working him, all right, let's go ahead and bring in a veteran and see if anybody else can compete at a higher level at the CB2 spot. But for right now and for the beginning of training camp, I just want to see what the Giants got. We can sign some players later on in free agency once training camp starts to heat up a bit and we know more so what we have on our roster. And hey, you also have to keep in mind, once we get to the end of training camp and into preseason, a lot of players are going to get cut. This free agency or this cap space that the Giants got from Darren Waller's retirement doesn't have to be applied to free agents now or at training camp. It can be applied all the way towards the end of the offseason, right before the regular season, when the waiver wire gets active. The Giants could absolutely make a trade then. They could pick up some talent on the waiver wire, or they can go after a free agent who's still on the market if Stephon Gilmore or somebody else is still available. So that's kind of my take on it, Alex. I'm not rushing into making any signings. I think there's so many reasons to wait. No need to go out there and sign some talent right away. But of course, there is talent out there, and you have to keep an eye on it. But the Giants really do need to give their young players a chance to compete and develop in these positions. Worry about adding some extra talent and depth to the roster later on. How do you feel about that, Alex? Just kind of the fact that Like, I took your argument and agreed with it, but then counterpointed it there and just kind of pointed out, like, yeah, these players don't deserve to be given starting jobs, but neither do the free agents that the Giants signed. So I think, and I want to see if you agree with me, that the Giants should wait to sign anybody until we actually see some of these players compete in training camp.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's totally fair. You kind of countered my point saying I was arguing against myself. I think the best case scenario is that Gilmore doesn't play at all, right? Like you sign him to say, look, we're bringing you in to compete for this CB2 job. And I would say this, if he wins that job, that's okay, because the primary goal for Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen right now is to win football games, not to develop their team for the next 10 years, right? At some point, you just got to win football games, and the best players have to play. So, like, from that perspective, I'd say you bring in Stephon Gilmore because, well, he's going to push those other guys to be better, and if he wins that job outright, it gives you a better chance to win. And Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen need to win, not because, I guess it's kind of time to win and they're on the hot seat, but because at the end of the day, like, you look at the situation with Daniel Jones, if they don't win, like, he's out, like, he's gone probably, and now they're restarting with a rookie quarterback, and I think a lot of people feel that that's probably the direction they're going to go in anyway. But there's a lot of different things unfolding in this Giants kind of organization in terms of narratives and how this upcoming season really is going to play out. In my perspective, it's about winning always, obviously, but the key things this upcoming season is finally breaking out of this horrible trend with the offensive line. That is the number one thing to me. If they fail to break out of this horrible decade-long trend of poor offensive line performance, it is going to get Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen fired. Like, I don't think that John Mara can stomach another season of a bottom 3 offensive line. I just don't think he can. If there's anything that'll get those guys fired, it is that. You know what I mean? Having 3 years to solve it and failing miserably. That is an essential situation, that the Giants have to improve upon. So they've thrown money, they've thrown draft picks. It is time. They've brought in a new coach. It's time to get better in the trenches. Now, the second thing is developing Malik Neighbors. He's your future superstar, right? He's your current star. He's the guy that has to be as advertised. You spent the 6th overall pick on him. He's arguably the best playmaker in a draft class that was historically good at receiver. He has to be the guy, and they have to make him the guy. He's got to get the reps, the targets, the attention, all of it. It's on Malik Neighbors, not Saquon anymore. It is Malik Neighbors' show on offense. However, Anthony, I was reading something really interesting today, and I think you'll find this interesting. And it was Jordan Love. And Jordan Love was saying, we don't need a WR1 to be a really good football team. And he comes from that kind of coaching tree, and his style he's learned. It goes back to Andy Reid and a couple of these other guys. The difference between what some of these teams are doing and what teams like the Green Bay Packers and the Kansas City Chiefs, they don't necessarily have a WR1. They're actually really good without one. Why? Because it opens up their offense to be very creative. And sometimes having that WR1 can be like you're trying to force the ball to this one player. I think the Giants have to find themselves in the middle of that, right? I love Wan'Dale Robinson. I think the guy is really, really freaking good. I think he's going to be an asset for this team. I think Theo Johnson is really solid. They have to focus on Malik Neighbors, but Malik Neighbors has to be why other guys succeed too. You know what I mean? That attention that he commands is why Wan'Dale has to be open with yards of separation, why Theo Johnson is destroying the seams, why Jalen Hyatt is running unguarded 10 yards downfield, because Malik Neighbors is dragging safeties out of position, is dragging corners out of position. So that's kind of where I find this like balance come into play. The WR1 is essential to the game plan, but it has to be a balance of how can you maximize your other players because your WR1 is so good. The problem with Saquon Barkley wasn't that he was, not explosive, because he was. The problem with Saquon Barkley is that he was a running back. And to stop a running back, all you have to do is stack the box. All you have to do is put enough guys up front so he can't get away. He still managed to sometimes, and the Giants were lucky that he did, because opposing teams said if we just stop Saquon Barkley, we stop their offense. If you stop Malik Neighbors, it's because you let Jalen Hyatt wide open because you had to allocate another safety to him. You know what I mean? Like, it's a different ball game when you're talking about receivers versus running backs. So I do think that focusing on Malik Neighbors is essential, but he is going to be a primary reason the other guys also succeed. And then, turning that thought process over to the secondary, it's about developing those young guys, of course, but it's also about the most important goal is winning. And Brian Daboll needs to win football games, right? And I think that if bringing in Stephon Gilmore to help you win football games because he's the best option you have, and he wins that job outright, I don't see why that's a bad thing. But with that being said, I do agree with your point. I think they give them a couple of weeks to get going. Cordell Font may look really good. He has had some injury stuff in the past that does concern me a little bit. He's a little bit wiry. He does get banged up. So having another veteran, maybe they don't go after a Gilmore. Maybe they go after someone a little bit worse that can easily slot in behind, but has veteran experience. Someone that can play if they need him to, but is okay, like kind of sitting there and watching until his name is called. What are your thoughts about kind of the multiple topics I kind of covered, honestly?
I mean, you did discuss a lot, and I think some of the points that you made about a WR1 are interesting. Obviously, we know the benefits that a WR1 can have on an offense, but you are right to point out the detriment that forcing the ball to a wide receiver one could be to an offense as well. It could be rather detrimental, especially when your quarterback is just constantly force-feeding the wide out. You do need a diverse offense, but I will say that the Giants do have one. I think that they have a lot of playmakers in their receiving core, and that's where I'm going to shift and give my points on this topic, Alex, and kind of discuss the changing of going from a run-heavy offense with Saquon Barkley doing pretty much all of the work and a tight end-heavy personnel package to 11 personnel. I think that, yes, Brian Daboll loves to run 12 personnel. He loves to have two tight ends on the field at the same time. You're not going to see it nearly as much this year. You're going to see a lot of 11 personnel because think about what the Giants have in their receiving core. They have Malik Neighbors, Darius Slayton, Wan'Dale Robinson, and Jalen Hyatt. They have 4 wide receivers who would start on most NFL teams. I don't think enough Giants fans realize what a luxury the Giants have right now in their receiving core. If there is not a lot of productivity in the passing game this season, it's not the fault of the wide receivers. Can't hear it this year. You can't tell me that the Giants don't have enough talent at wide receiver this season if they don't go for a bunch of passing yards. It's going to be somewhere else, whether you want to blame coaching staff, quarterback, offensive line, whatever. You're not blaming the receivers this year. But that's really going to change the way that this offense operates because no longer are they going to be giving 200-plus touches to Saquon Barkley. They're going to be giving a bunch of touches to all these different receivers. They're going to be playing with one tight end and one running back on the field far more often than they have in the past. You're going to see them rotate and mix and match based on matchups and opponents. Malik Neighbors, Slayton, Robinson, Hyatt, who's on the field at what time, it's all going to depend on who the Giants are facing. But again, you're going to see less tight ends now that Darren Waller has retired. If Darren Waller were still in the lineup, then yeah, you probably do see a lot of 12 personnel. You'll see Waller and you'll see Bellinger continuing to play that blocking role. But now without Waller, you're probably seeing a lot of Theo Johnson as your receiving tight end in 11 personnel packages and a rotation of Neighbors, Robinson, Hyatt, and Slayton. So you're going to see a lot of 11 personnel. The Giants are going to have to throw the football more. They don't have a superstar running back who can just turn a 1-yard potential gain into 10 yards on any given play like Saquon Barkley. They have a good backfield. I like Singletary. I like Tyrone Tracy Jr. and I like Eric Gray, but they don't have Saquon Barkley anymore. This offense needs to change, and this is going to put a lot more pressure on the quarterback position. Daniel Jones has to step up here, but now that he has all of these playmakers, the excuses are running thin. We do have a lot of talent in this receiving core. It's going to change the way that this offense operates, especially, Alex, if Brian Daboll does end up calling the plays this year like we believe he will, because he has been at OTAs and he's been talking about it all offseason long. Daboll calling the plays for this offense with all those receivers, with this 11 personnel, you can definitely see this offense take that next step and really become a lot more dynamic in the passing game. And they don't have to force it to one wide receiver because the Giants don't just have one good wide receiver. Darius Slayton is still here. He's been the leading receiver in 4 of the last 5 seasons, and he's still on this team. And then you have Malik Neighbors, who's going to be your leading receiver this year, hopefully. And you got Wan'Dale Robinson, who put up over 500 yards last year. And you got Jalen Hyatt, who many believed could be a potential 1,000-yard receiver coming out of college. So they don't have to force feed a WR1. They don't have to force feed Neighbors. They don't have to force feed anybody like they did with Barkley or like they did in some games with Waller. He had 12 targets in one of those games last year. They don't have to do it. The Giants can just be open to do whatever they want, call the plays, win their matchups, because they've got the receiving personnel and talent to beat cornerbacks one-on-one and create yardage downfield. So it's a really talented Giants offense in the receiving core this year. What their ceiling is, who knows? But it's definitely higher than it was last year, that's for sure, because this offense was freaking putrid last year. But now with all this wide receiver talent, even though they lost Darren Waller, it's almost addition by subtraction in a way because they lose Waller, but that opens things up for them to play a lot more 11 personnel, which ultimately means more playing time and more targets and touches for guys like Wan'Dale Robinson and Jalen Hyatt, and I think that they're very talented players. So I think this offense is going to look a lot different, Alex. I think we're going to see a lot more 11 personnel, but the loss of Darren Waller, let's kind of talk about that before we wrap this up. And I do want to ask your opinion on how big of a loss you think it is and what your confidence level is in Theo Johnson and Daniel Bellinger, because I know that Waller didn't play a ton last year, and when he did play, he was banged up, but he also was pretty good when he played. Like, I remember that game against Arizona, he had a bunch of targets and he had a bunch of receptions. No, he didn't score a ton of touchdowns last year. However, he did get the ball downfield. He did convert a lot of first down opportunities. He was a reliable playmaker when he was in the lineup. However, now he's no longer in the lineup. The Giants have Theo Johnson. They have Daniel Bellinger. How do you feel about that? Are you comfortable with those guys being your starting two tight ends, or do you think that the Giants need to kind of shift their offensive approach here with Waller no longer in the lineup?
Look, I think that every good team is finding solid value in these mid-round tight ends right now. I think Theo Johnson could be another one of them. You look at Pat Freiermuth, you look at Sam Laporta, you look at some of these Musgrove. There's so many good young tight ends. There's no reason that a 6'6", 255 tight end that runs a 4.58 can't be great, right? He was tremendous in the red zone for Penn State last season. He was underutilized in the passing game. Let him cook, right? Just let him get the opportunities. Put him in the jumbo slot spot. Give him reps. Like, this season, it's about winning, but it's also about feeding these young guys experience. Because, right, Darren Waller, great player, liability because of his injuries, right? That was kind of the situation we were in. We never knew if he was going to be healthy any given week. I mean, we just heard, and God bless the guy, because he almost died in week 10, apparently. He was having some sort of situation. Obviously, super glad he's okay. But that was crazy to read about. And it's like, what is happening with this guy? Like, what was going on with them? Hopefully he's okay. He's doing better. Seems like, he's using music as an outlet for his emotions. And I support that 100%, even if I don't necessarily like the music. I think that ultimately you look at what the Giants have now. Theo Johnson, tons of upside. Daniel Bellinger, underutilized. I'm fine with what we have at tight end. Why? Because Malik Neighbors is going to be doing the most of your damage in the receiving game now. That's the guy I'm mostly looking at. If the Giants stumble upon a great tight end, Theo Johnson, to help support that equation, we're in a really good spot. We're in a really good spot. So yeah, I feel pretty good about our tight end spot right now.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like I said, it's going to be a lot more 11 personnel, a lot less reliance on the tight end spot. But I like Theo Johnson and I like Daniel Bellinger a lot. I think Bellinger was criminally underutilized last year. I'm hoping he plays a larger role. And Theo Johnson, man, he's one of those rookies who, and the Giants have a few of these guys, one of those rookies who might step into a role much larger than they expected, play a whole lot more than they expected to. And if they rise to the occasion, they could end up being a supreme hit for this Giants front office in the draft department. So really like the potential of Theo Johnson, all the athleticism he brings, and just his size and his speed and what he could do for this offense could be big time. And, of course, combining with Daniel Bellinger, who's a great, reliable underneath threat. I really like what the Giants have on this offensive lineup. I think that they have a lot more talent this year than they did last year, but it's all about staying healthy, putting it together, and playing with consistency. I do trust in Brian Dable, though. I think him calling the plays this year, hopefully he does that, should help this offense quite a bit. So it'll be interesting. And, of course, as we continue to go through this offseason, we're going to update you on everything about this Giants offense, the defense, the special teams, everything right here on Fireside Giants. So make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Ring the bell so don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you're listening to Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, we'll catch you all on the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.